Hello, travelers. Boardman21 here. Today I got a 1 to 75 leveling guide for you. This one based around the Lich with Hungering Souls, which will be procced using death seals and you manually casting them. The damage is really good for this. In the first 12 hours of playing this, we got to Empowered. It went really smooth through the campaign. And once you stack a bunch of life and get your defenses in order, it's actually a very tanky build as well. Since you do have Reperform, you have that free life, you can have tons of life, you can use Endurance since when you have Death Seal you'll be at low life and you'll just have that extra DR from being in Reperform. You have all the extra damage for being with Death Seal active, and overall it's just a quick paced, high damage, decent AoE build that has good single target as well and really allows you to just kind of fly through echoes. Again, this build comes together really quick. There are no uniques required for this build to get going. We're still not wearing any at this point in the game, and there's not really any that you really need unless you find something that has 3 or 4 LP, so you can have all the affixes you need anyways. Now this leveling guide will be set up just like all the other ones. We break it down at certain levels, usually when you have a new skill slot open up or just so many levels have gone by, it's time to put in more points in your passives and skills, and I show you exactly where I put them. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright travelers, we are now level 4. We have started a Lich. With this we're going to be using minions through the campaign, and then as we get towards the end game, switching over to Hungering Souls and doing the Death Seal with the firing of Hungering Souls out of that. But first, at level 4, we're going to spec into our first skill and then enter a few of our passive points. But our character sheet right now for this chapter, so far we've encountered a lot of fire, so fire resist may be the thing that you want to go for first. After that, we haven't really got anything yet. We haven't found much gear for our passives. Like I said, we've got 2 points to throw, and we're going to put them both into Blood Aura. This will increase the damage that we're doing right now with the Wandering Spirits and with Rip Blood. And then we also have the minions out, the skeletons, so that'll increase their damage as well. So 2 points into Blood Aura. And then for skills, our first spec skill is going to go ahead and be Summon Skeleton, because we haven't got Hungering Souls yet. That'll be the main skill we use later. And then for this, our first point, we're already going to put it into Unholy Rage and start working towards getting Marrow Walkers. We're going to want to increase the maximum number of skeletons that we can get as quick as possible so that we can do more damage. And that'll be it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 10 when we spec into our second skill. Alright travelers, we are now level 8, which means we get to spec into our second skill. Right now fire and physical are still the main elements that we're running into, so stack as much fire resist and physical resist as you can get. We've had a couple of items that have dropped with some. As you can see, we have a little bit. We're going to specialize into our second skill, which will be Hungering Souls, but first we got to do passive points so that we can unlock it. We're going to go ahead and cap out the Blood Aura. This will give us increased damage as well as minions increased damage, just to kind of help us speed through the campaign a little bit with all that extra damage, and that unlocks the Hungering Souls. For Hungering Souls, like I said, we're going to specialize into it. It'll be our second skill here. And the first point, we're going to go ahead and put 1 point into Soul Swarm. This will give us extra projectiles. Will be a little bit more mana heavy, but what's nice about it is when we do run into a whole group of mobs, we'll be able to hit all of them, or at least a good portion of them, since we'll have extra projectiles. Eventually, we'll work towards the right side in dealing the single soul limit, and that'll be once we have Death Seal and it's firing them off. A couple of them every second later in the game. And then for our items, like I said, haven't found anything super special. Just a couple of items with health, and of course that fire resist and physical resist. And that'll be it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 13 when we spec into our next skill. Alright, travelers, we are now level 14. We have finished chapter 1. We did experience some problems with the online server. This is patch day, but we've moved on. We're going forward, and the main resistance that you still want at this point seems to be fire and physical. We haven't ran into too much void at this point, so all of chapter 1 seems to have changed. Void resistance is not the main thing you want. Make sure you get some fire and some physical. That has been the main thing that we've ran into. Having those two is definitely going to increase your survivability. For skills, we still have the summon skeleton. That's going to be the main thing that we're using. We're going to go ahead and put one more point into Unholy Rage and 1 point into Marrow Walker, so that'll give you an additional skeleton. You'll be able to do that at level 8. We are now level 14, so we've got 3 more points. We're going to go ahead and throw 2 of them into Necrotic Conviction. This will give our warriors more health, so they have better survivability, but the archers that we summon will do increased damage. And then 1 more point in Hollow Walkers is going to give you an additional skeleton. So this will increase the max from the 3 that we had, 4 with Marrow Walkers, to 5 with Hollow Walkers. And then for Hungering Souls, we do want to put a point into Forbidden Pack eventually, once we get probably above 100 mana. This way we'll get some flat spell damage with it, and then we'll work into that single shot. But we're not going to do that until we get Reaper Form and get the Death Seal that's giving us that single projectile firing off to get good damage. Right now we kind of want AoE. So we did put that 1 point in Soul Swarm. This is going to give us those extra projectiles. It does increase the mana cost, but mana hasn't been too much of an issue. But with our additional 4 points, we're going to put 3 of them into Ravenous. Give us more necrotic damage on hit. We're not converting the Hungering Souls into any other element. Necrotic damage is the main damage source of this build, even into the end game. And then the final point we're going to put into Grave Bond for 15% more damage. Now this is a more modifier, so this is going to give it a huge damage boost, which will be nice, but you must have 1 minion active, and at this point, since we are running Summon Skeletons, we will have at least 1 minion at all times. Then for passives, we got 10 more passive points. We're going to throw 8 of them into Forbidden Knowledge for that intelligence. This will also give us some necrotic resist. And the final 2 points are both going to go into Stolen Vitality for that increased health. This will also give the minions increased health for better survivability. Again, minions are not going to be in the end game other than just having 1, so that you have increased damage with Hungering Souls. However, during the early game and mid game, minions are something we'll have, so this will give them better survivability. And then for our inventory, like I said, nothing special going on. This is a no unique required build. Even in the end game, we won't be running them. So you just want to have a one-handed wand, scepter, or a two-handed staff that's going to give you as much spell damage as possible. And then everywhere else, get your resistance, get health, and also get as much minion damage, minion health as you can, especially during the campaign, just for your survivability and damage to be able to go right through it. But nothing special going on in terms of uniques. And that'll be it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 20 for the next one. Alright, travelers, we are now level 20, which means that we can spec into our third skill, which is going to be Reperform, thanks to unlocking your mastery at the end of Chapter 2 instead of Chapter 3. So we have access to that skill much earlier in the game. But first, the character sheet. As you can see, we have Fire and Physical. Going into Chapter 3, Void Resist is definitely another thing that you want to get, going through Edora's Temple and all of those areas. Void Resist is going to be a big one, so try and get some of that as well. But Fire, Physical, and Void are the main things that you want at this point. And then for damage types, we're basically doing minion damage and a lot of necrotic spell damage. So for skills, we're going to start with the Summon Skeleton. We're still using it. And there's a trick that we kind of want to do here to get more damage out of the Hungering Souls. And that's going to be that we want a maximum of 3 skeletons, or 3 minions in general. But at the same time, we don't want to reduce it to where we just have 3 of the little ones. So we're going to put 1 point in Dread Felix. And what this does is it halves the number of skeletons that we can have, but increases their damage and size. Now, we could have 5 before we put this point in. The game rounds up, so we should be able to have 3 now. If you do a +1 maximum somewhere else, you'll still have 3 because it'll go to 6. But if you do 2 more, you'll end up getting 4 minions because it'll round up from 7. Half of that, 3.5, it'll round to 4. So we want to keep it right about where we have it so that you have 3 maximum skeletons at all times. And the reason for that, I'll show you when we get into Hungering Souls. And then we got 1 more point. We're going to go ahead and throw that point into the Necrotic Conviction to give our archers more damage and warriors more maximum health. Then we have 2 points for Hungering Souls. Now the reason that we want to have 3 max skeletons is this node right here, Unholy Trinity. Your Hungering Souls deal more damage if you have exactly 3 minions, and it's a big chunk. So we're going to go ahead and throw 2 points in there. Our next point will go there as well, so that you'll get that 150% more damage when you have 3 minions. And it's as simple as just having 3 minions out, and your Hungering Souls are going to deal more than double their normal damage. So this is huge, and that's why we want to have that 3 minions at all times. And then by giving them that node, that buffs their damage and their size, which gives them more threat. It's just going to give you extra protection and keep them being tough. And then for our third skill, we're going to go ahead and go into Reperform. Normally you wouldn't be able to get this early, but with the change to how early you get mastery now, we can do Reperform as our third skill at level 20. With this, we have 4 points. And the main things we want to get into is slowing down the health drain and increasing our leech right off the bat so that we can stay in the form longer. So we're going to go throw 2 points into Mistress of Decay. This will give us that reduced health drain. It also increased our damage over time. The only thing doing damage over time for us right now is the possession by the Hungry Soul. So we do have a little bit, but that's not really what we're going for damage. And then we're going to throw 2 points in Harbinger of Blood. This increases our health leech as well as our healing effectiveness, and you gain health when you reap. The last 2 don't really matter, but the health leech is huge. Now right now at level 20 you're thinking, well, where do we have leech? Well, we're about to get some in our passive, so this is going to increase the amount that we're getting out of the passive points early on in the game, which is going to make your survivability go way up. Speaking of passives, we're going to go over there. We got 7 points. We got to throw 2 more into the Acolyte base class before we can start putting points into the Mastered Lich. The 2 points are both going to go into Blood Pact. This will increase our damage whenever an enemy has died nearby for 4 seconds. So we'll get 24% increased damage. This will also drain our life a little bit more, but now that we have Leech, we'll be able to handle that. With 5 more points, we're putting them all into our Lich, and all 5 points are going to go into Survival of the Cruel, and this is what will give us that spell damage leeched as health. So with 5 points there, we'll get 2.5%, and then we'll get 20% increase when we're in Reperform, so it'll be closer to about 3% of our spell damage leeched as health at this point in the game, which is going to really increase your survivability, because at the moment potions were the real only way besides health regen to get your life to go back up. And then moving forward, capping out this, capping out the Apocrypha, and capping out the Dance with Death, all 3 of these are really good nodes to really put all your first points into. And then for items, nothing huge here. Again, the main thing you want is as much flat spell damage as possible, and then increased necrotic damage, as necrotic damage is the main source of damage we're doing, and using a 2-handed staff at this point going to give you the most damage that you can get. With that, everything else, again, just get your resistances, get increased health. That's really all you need. We do have one what looks like legendary at this point, because we found a Weaver's Will unique right off the bat. Nothing super special about it, but it does give us haste a whole lot of the time, which is really nice for the campaign. It's helping us speed run through a bit faster. If you don't have this, any pair of boots with just move speed on them will be perfectly fine. But that's it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 30-ish when we do the next one. Alright, Travelers, we are now level 28. We're going to do another update, put in some passive points. For gear, we haven't really done too much for resistance. A lot of poison resist is on the boots that we have, the necrotic resist. We're getting that on gear as well as passives. And then right now, physical and void resist is kind of the main thing you want. The necrotic resist is also nice. But those are the main things. Element will come later. And then for our skills, we got 2 more points for Summon Skeleton. We're going to go ahead and throw one of them into Marrow Tap for that health leech. It won't give them too much more survivability, but everything helps. And then 1 point into Empty the Graves. We're going to put 2 points here so that we can summon all 3 of them at once, so that we just have to cast it once and not worry about trying to summon, 3 times in a row when all 3 of them do die when they get hit by an AoE or something. And then next we'll be working into their mana efficiency and getting mana back when we do cast them, so they're not a big mana drain on us. For Hungering Souls, we got 2 more points. We're going to throw both of them into Grave Bond for that more damage. And then for Reaper Form, we got 5 points. We're going to cap out that Mistress of Decay to slow down the health drain. 2 more points in Harbinger of Blood for that increased health leech, which will be really nice for us. And then the last point we're going to put into Ghastly Flow. What's nice about this is we're always using Reap. So we're not always below half health, so we won't always get the move speed, but this does unlock the Reaper's Curse and the Death Sword, which is going to give us a ton of increased damage as we continue to get more points. And then for passives, we got 8 more of them. We're going to cap out the Survival of the Cruel for that spell damage leads to health. That's really nice for our Hungering Souls. And then at this point you have a choice. If you're having mana problems, you can build into Apocrypha for that mana regen. We are, however, doing alright on mana, so we're going to put our 5 points into Grasp of Fate for that 60% increase in necrotic damage to really boost our damage. And then the next skill that we'll be building into is going to be Aura of Decay. We're going to use that for healing for ourselves, which will be really nice. It'll really come in to help us at the end game, not so much right now, but in the end game it'll be really nice. And then once we get Death Seal, that'll of course be the 5th skill that we spec into. And then for gear, nothing special. Again, just look for a 2-handed stat that's got the most base spell damage that you can get, and then just put increased spell and necrotic damage on it. And for gear, just get your resistance, get additional health, and get minion health so they survive longer. And that's it. I'll see you guys at level 35 when we spec into our 4th skill. Alright, Travelers, we are now level 35. We get to spec into our 4th skill, but first, we're going to go over our resistances here. Right now, physical resist is kind of the main thing you want. We don't have too much of it, but our survivability has still been good. We do have Reaper Form, so it's like an extra life, which is really nice, and we have quite a bit of Leech, which is keeping our life full. But again, physical resist, along with really all the other resistances at this point you want. But again, physical is the main thing. Void is very helpful as well. And then for skills, we got 2 more points for Summon Skeleton. We're going to cap out that Empty the Grave so that when we cast it, we get all 3 of them at once, so it'll always replace all of them. And then we're going to start reducing the mana cost, so we're going to put our last point here into Unbound Necromancy. Once we reduce that mana cost a bit, we're going to start working into getting Ward Form, but then the big thing we want is the Mind Catcher, so that when we do cast it, we're killing off the ones that are there, so when we replenish them, we're getting mana back, which is really nice, which will give you the mana that it's costing to cast them back, which is really nice. Then we have Hungering Souls. We got 2 more points here. We're going to cap out the Grey Bond for that extra more damage, and then 1 point in Forbidden Pact so that we're getting additional spell damage per 20 max mana. Now right now we got 90 mana, so this is going to give us 4, unless it rounds up, I'm not sure, but we're either getting 4 or 5 more flat spell damage, which is really nice. Going to give us a little boost of damage. And then as soon as we get Death Seal here around level 50, we're going to be working into Isolation and doing that solo Hungering Souls, and at the same time, we'll have it to where it starts having a chance to cast when we get hit. Then for Reaper form, we got 3 more points. We're going to put 1 point into Reaper's Ascendance, so we can start getting spell damage increased stacks while we're in Reaper form, and then 2 points into Reaper's Curse to give us that increased damage as well as crit chance, which will be really nice. We're going to want Hungering Souls as we work towards 100% crit with it to do more damage. And then for our 4th skill, we're going to go Aura of Decay. We're going to be using Aura of Decay to heal us. Once we have Death Seal, we'll be capping our life low so that we have a ton of increased damage for low life. And what Aura of Decay is useful for is it will heal us a percentage of missing health that we have. So when we're low life, it'll be healing us for a huge section of our life that we're missing, which will be really nice to kind of help keep us full whenever we're not leeching or killing enemies. And then 1 point in Inoculation so that we take reduced poison damage. Then for passives, we got 9 more points. We're going to throw 8 of them into Dance with Death. This gives us increased damage, 40% at all times, and then whenever our life is low, below 35%, it'll be tripled for 120% increase. And then the last point is going to go into Apocrypha, give us some int, and start giving us some mana regen so we can spam more Hungering Souls. And then for gear, again, the main thing for a weapon, as much flat spell damage as you can get, and then increased spell and necrotic damage on it will give you the biggest boost of damage. And then for our items, you can see that we have a couple of Weaver's Wills, which they seem to be pretty common for drops. This one, it's got freeze rate multi, which we don't really care about, but the 15% more spell damage to low health enemies gives us a little boost of damage as we're working down their life. It also gives us cast speed and some attributes, which is really nice early game. So we threw that one on. And then we have the Advent of the Erased as well. This one gives us that poison resist and haste when enemies are dying, which is really nice. But everything else, just go with health, resist, and for your minions, give them increased health so they have better survivability. And that'll be it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 42, 43 for the next one. Alright, travelers, we are now level 41. We're at the Immortal Summit about to take on the bosses. So right before you do this boss fight, make sure you got Poison Resist, Necrotic Resist. We've got our Necrotic Resist mostly through passives, and our Poison Resist we have mostly on gear. But those are the two that you really want before this fight, and then going after that, really work in the Elemental. We're going to start encountering a lot of fire. For skills, we got 1 more point for Summon Skeleton. We're going to continue to reduce that cost of the mana cost for them, and then work into getting mana back when we summon them. For Hungering Souls, we have 1 more point. This is where we're going to go ahead and put into Vengeful Souls. This is when we get hit, there's going to be a 70% chance for that single projectile and a 7% chance for it to actually fire all of our projectiles. Now with the 1 point there, the other nice thing is we're going to remove the point for Soul Swarm on our next update once we get Death Seal, and we're going to start putting into the single projectile. And the single projectile means that we don't care that it's only 1 projectile coming out, which is why we want to take advantage of that 70% chance. We also get hit a lot, so it should really help with having a ton more Hungering Souls come out. For Reaper form, 1 more point, going to throw it into Reaper's Curse for that increased damage and crit chance. And then for Aura of Decay, 7 more points. We're going to cap out the Inoculation so we take less poison damage. 3 points in Chill to the Bone so that we're also chilling enemies every second that are in the Aura of Decay, and then 1 point in Plague Rat for that increased area with it. Then for passives, we got 8 more points, all of them going into the Lich Mastery and all 8 into Unclosing Wounds We get that 112% increased damage. This will drain our life a bit more, but again, we don't really care too much about that. This also unlocks Death Seal, but we're going to wait till level 50 for our next skill and spec into that. Death Seal, of course, is going to be the skill that fires off our Hungering Souls a couple of times a second, which will be really nice, and that's when we'll go to that single projectile, so we have tons of them coming out. And right now, when we don't have that, we don't want to go to that single because we want the projectiles. Otherwise, it's going to feel really bad when you have a ton of mobs around. And then for our inventory, we do have 2 Weaver's Wills items. We did find a Weaver's Will gloves, the Swaddled of the Erased, and we did get 4 fixes on this, which is really nice. The stats aren't that good, like the freeze rate we don't care about, the area for skills, the dodge rate, none of that matters. The elemental resist is our lowest tier fix, so we don't get too much out of it, but it is a nice level you need for all those attributes and cast speed. So this is pretty nice. And then again on your gear, you just want to go for your resistances, some minion health, and then for the weapon, spell damage, necrotic damage, and as much flat spell damage on it as you can get. We should be updating our staff here soon when we get the next tier up and get a lot more flat spell. And that'll be it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 50 when we spec into Death Seal as our 5th skill. Alright, travelers, we are now level 50, which means we get to spec into our 5th skill, which will be Death Seal. But first, the character sheet. At this point, we're in the end game, we're in the first timeline, so getting all of your resistances capped is going to be what we're working towards. So you're going to want to cap all of them. You can see we're not even close right now, but cap them all, and at the same time, you're going to start wanting to work into both endurance and your critical strike avoidance. You don't need to cap these yet, you'll still have survivability without them. Get your resistance first, but start looking for those 2 as well. For skills, we got 2 more points for Summon Skeleton. We're going to put 1 point in Soul Catcher and then 1 point into Mind Catcher, so that when we summon our skeletons, like once one dies and you still have 2 alive, but you got to have 3, you can use this and you'll get 10 mana back for killing off 2 for summoning them, and with a mana cost of 15, it means that we're only going to be spending 5 mana now, which will be really nice. So a way to get some of your mana back so you can cast more Hungering Souls. Speaking of Hungering Souls, we got 2 more points here. We are finally going to switch over to the single projectile. So 1 point in isolation for that 100% more hit damage. They'll also be 100% larger. And then 1 point in Great Soul for another 25% more hit damage, another more modifier. This will increase the mana cost by 2, but we're actually going to take the 1 point on Soul Swarm because we don't need the extra projectiles. They're useless. And we'll get rid of that mana cost as well. So we lose 2 mana here. We gain it back over here. Mana cost will be the same. And then as we continue up, we're going to want to cap out the Great Soul. And then the other things you're going to want to build into is start getting that base crit chance along with the crit multi, as we will be working towards 100% crit and getting even more damage with that. Then for Reaper form, 2 more points here. We're going to go ahead and cap out the Reaper's Curse for that increased damage and crit chance, and 1 point in Death's Door, so at low health we'll have increased global damage. For Aura of Decay, we got 3 more points. Cap out the Plague Rat for the increased area. Again, this is applying chill on our enemies as well as healing us, so it's nice for survivability. And then for our last skill, Death Seal, like I said, will be that. We're going to go ahead and unlock the Hungering Souls being fired off. So 2 points in Moratorium and then 1 point in Devouring Release, so that every 1.5 seconds a Hungering Soul will be cast out, which will be really, really nice. What this is going to do is while Death Seal is active, we don't have to manually cast it anymore. You'll have the wave going out doing AoE as well as Hungering Souls being fired off, so you can go a little bit more zoom. We got 4 more points, which isn't enough to get to Deadlock, which we want for that reduced health, so that we're capped at low life, so you have all the low life increases for both damage reduction and increased damage. So we'll work a little bit towards there with 2 points in Corrupted Consciousness. We'll get that on the next update. And then for now, 2 points in Insatiable Soul, so that we're firing the Hungering Souls a bit faster. With that 50% damage reduction, we should be right around 1 second them being fired off, which will be enough to still feel good. Remember, you don't have the extra projectiles anymore, so your AoE is going to go down. You're going to want to hit things with the Death Wave. That's going to be your AoE killer. Then for passives, 10 more points. We're going to throw them all into Necrotic Energy. This is going to give us that spell necrotic damage, so both Death Wave and the Hungering Souls will now have 20 flat necrotic damage added to them, which is going to be a big damage boost for us. And then for the inventory, again, just going for a two-handed staff that's got as much spell damage, flat spell damage as you can get, as well as increased spell damage and increased necrotic damage. It's going to give you the biggest damage boost. For everything else, you want your minions to survive, get some minion health, and then just get your resistance, your critical strike avoidance, and your endurance. For idols, at this point, we're trying to get a bunch of increased damage while transformed. You can also get increased critical strike chance as well. That's going to help your Hungering Souls crit more often, which is also a big damage boost. But that'll be it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 55 for the next one. Alright, travelers, we are now level 55, which means time to update just a bit more. First, for the character sheet, we have not gotten any endurance or critical strike avoidance yet, and we have not capped down a resist. But those are the main things that you want to do. Get your resistances capped. We need a lot more elemental right now, but just haven't found any gear yet with it. And then get that endurance and critical strike up. For that critical strike avoidance, you are going to want 100%. But again, not super important until you get to like the 3rd or 4th timeline. Especially get it before you get too empowered. For skills, we got 1 more point for Summon Skeleton. We're going to throw it into Mind Catcher. For Hungering Souls, 2 more points. We're going to go ahead and throw 1 point into Great Soul. We don't want to get the mana cost up too much right now until our mana regen is up and we have more maximum mana, because you'll run into mana problems. So 1 point there, and then the other point we're going to put into Piercing Gaze for that base crit chance and start working into that a little bit until our mana regen is higher. We got 1 more point for Reperform. Going to throw it into Death's Door. Remember, this gives you increased damage at low life, and once we put our next points into Death Seal, we'll be at low life every time that it's active for the full duration. For Aura of Decay, 1 more point, going to throw it into Undertow, so we start slowing the enemies as well as chilling them. This will be really nice when it's active. The enemies that are in melee range, when you hit them with that every second, you'll be able to run away really easily. And then 8 points in Death Seal. We're going to go ahead and put 3 points into Desperate Shroud. This will give you 6 flat armor per 10 missing health, and because we'll be at low life while it's active, you're going to get a ton of armor this way, which will increase your survivability. 1 point in Deadlock. This means that while it's active, and as soon as you activate it, your health will automatically be capped at 33% of your maximum, which is automatically going to put you in low life, which gives you that percent missing health. You get that DR from it, you get the increased damage from it, and you get any passives that give you increased damage or effects based on being low life. So that's huge for us. We got 4 more points. We're going to cap out the duration, so 1 more point in Moratorium for that duration, 2 points in Insatiable Soul. We get that maximum frequency of Hungering Souls coming out, and then 1 more point in Corrupted Consciousness. This will give us increased damage per 3% missing health. So right now we'll have 67% missing health the moment you activate it, so you'll have 67% increase. And we'll continue to put points in that until we unlock and get 1 point into Mortal Pulse, so that we get that death wave every second. That'll help you with the AoE. And then 1 point later in Soul Satiability will reduce that health drain that you get from all the passives we took for the increased damage that have your health regen going down every second. For passives, 5 more points, putting all 5 of them into Ageless Ascetic. This will give us move speed and cast speed, which is nice, but also the big thing is that damage leached as health. This is all damage that you do will be leached as health on hit, which is huge for us. I remember in Reaper form you get a percent increase, which right now is at 40%, so this will be a total of 7% of all damage, which is huge for us. And then for the inventory, haven't found anything special right now. Sorry, we accidentally equipped that, but we have a two-handed staff. And then again, you're just looking for as much flat spell damage, and then increased spell and increased necrotic damage. We have lightning damage on this, you don't want that, it's just what it rolled. But necrotic damage, spell damage, as much flat spell as possible is going to be your damage boost. And then for defense, just get some minion health so your minions aren't always dying, and get all that resist, critical strike avoidance, and endurance that you can. And that'll be it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 65 for the next one. Alright, travelers, we are now level 65, so we got some more points to put in. We have capped on our Void Resist. We are on the 𝐒𝐲 timeline, so we're going to be taking on 𝐒𝐲 here in just a minute. So make sure you cap that before the second timeline boss, that level 66 timeline, as it will be almost completely void fight. We did lose our Poison Resist, but we have capped out Necrotic. We're still trying to get our Elemental and Physical up. We got a little bit of Critical Strike Avoidance, but you still need to get that up to 100% by the time we get to Empowered, and then we still need some Endurance. So we still have a lot of gear that we're looking for in terms of defense. For skills, we got 2 more points for Summon a Skeleton. We're going to go ahead and cap out that Mind Catcher for the mana gained when we summon them, and 1 more point in the Unbound Necromancy to reduce the amount of mana that they cost. They have a 35 mana cost right now, but again, we're getting 15 of that back per minion that it kills, so it doesn't take too much of our mana. They do tend to die every now and then. Of course, we'll try and build in some more increased minion health as we get better and better gear. For Hungering Souls, we got 2 more points. We're going to go ahead and put 1 more in Great Soul. This does increase that mana cost even more. I would put both in there, but we do want to get a bit more mana, a little bit more mana regen before we put that final point in. And then 1 more point in Piercing Gaze for that base crit chance. They are critting a lot more often now that we have that 6%. The 3% we had with some increase from different sources was really helpful. But as you get towards that 100% crit, you're going to notice they hit so much harder. And then 2 points for Reaper form. Going to go ahead and cap out that Death's Door. So we'll have 100% increased damage from this passive, and that's going to be multiplicative, which is really nice. And the nice thing about this is, of course, whenever Death Seal's active, you'll always be at that low life, so you get it. Then for Aura of Decay, we got 2 more points, both of them going into Undertow for that slow chance per second to all enemies that are inside of that area of effect. And then for Death Seal, we have +2 on our helm, so we already went and put 2 points in, 1 point in Moral Pulse and 1 point in the Soul Stability. So if you don't have that +2 levels, those are where you would put the 2 points, but I have 2 additional points to put in. I'm going to cap out the Insatiable Soul, and then put 1 point in Tachycardia so that we get the death wave a little more frequent, as well as have a higher crit chance with it. But again, just make sure that you put that Soul Stitch ability in. That will be really nice for that health drain and reduce it from the passives so that you don't get out of Reaper form quite so fast. And then of course the Mortal Pulse really helps when it comes to doing AoE while Death Seal is active. For passives, got 10 more points. We're going to go ahead and throw 5 of them into Soul Maul for that damage leech his health and increased health leech. This is really huge. This will keep you in Reaper form much longer. And then the last 5 points we're putting into Deathbringer for that critical strike chance. If you're manually casting Hungering Souls, it's nice as well. You'll cast a little faster, but that critical strike chance with all the base crit that we're getting for Hungering Souls, really going to increase it so that you see a lot more crits. And then next we'll go into the Clairvoyant Insight for that crit multi so that they hit even harder. And then for our inventory, again, going for a 2-handed staff. We need to update ours here soon. We have a pretty low one. It only has 47 spell damage. You can get closer to 100 on some of the higher endgame ones right now. And then, of course, you want spell damage and necrotic damage on it. You can even get crit multi. That'll be very helpful, as well as you get closer to 100% crit. And then for idols, you can get increased damage while transformed. There's also a couple other idols that I'm looking at, like the flat health and the healing effectiveness. The increased healing effectiveness should increase the amount you're healed with the Aura of Decay percentage of missing health. It doesn't say that it scales with healing effectiveness anymore. It used to. We're going to test it later, and I'll let you know in the next update. And then for the rest of the gear, just get minion health and then all the resistance, critical strike avoidance, and endurance that you need. That's all you're really looking for in the rest of the spots. The helm, you can get the plus levels to Death Seal or Hungering Souls. We actually found both of them. We're wearing the Death Seal one at the moment, but if you get plus levels to Hungering Souls, you can use that as well and get some extra damage or additional base crit chance through that. We might switch later, but we haven't decided yet. But that'll be it for this update. I'll see you guys at level 75 for the last one. Yeah, no worries. I'll see you tomorrow if you're out here. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be on again. Alright, travelers, we are now level 75. Time for the final update for this leveling guide. As you can see for our resistances, we have capped out most of our elemental. We capped the physical. We're still working on poison and void, and necrotic also just about capped. We did also increase our endurance. Endurance was a big one because we're low life most of the time, so we really take advantage of that endurance, so try and cap that as possible. We do still need the critical strike avoidance, though. We're going to be aiming to get that blessing from the Reign of Dragons timeline. Once we get into an empowered, we'll go back and try and get a really good roll on that, and then get the rest of it on gear. But getting 100% CSA, especially in empowered, is going to be really good to get as well. But remember, try and get all those resistances capped out first. For skills, we got 2 more points for Summon Skeleton. We do have +1 level to this because we have a +1 minions on the two-handed staff. It's an implicit. With those 2 points, we're going to go ahead and cap out the Unbound Necromancy, and the last point is going to go into Necrotic Conviction. Gives our warriors a little more health and the archers a little more damage. Again, minion damage, not really something we're going after. You want them to have as much survivability as possible, so that warrior health is nice. You can also build into the leech, so when they do hits, they're not doing a whole lot of damage, so they don't leech a whole lot, but this will increase their survivability by a little bit. Then for Hungering Souls, we got 1 more point. We're going to go ahead and cap out that Great Soul for that hit damage. So increase their size, mana cost is a little more. Remember, the Hungering Souls that are spawned by Death Seal do not cost mana, so we're not too worried about it. Manually casting, though, you will run through mana really, really quick. The last point of this, until we get plus levels, you know, we're aiming for a helm that has tier 7 Hungering Souls, so we can get 4 additional levels. But for now, the last point, we're going to go ahead and put into the Piercing Gaze for that base crit. Once we get +4 levels to it, though, we're going to want to cap this out and get the critical strike multiplier so that you had that 100% crit. That's something you'll want in the end game, but it'll take you a while to find the right piece to be able to do that. And then for Reaper form, we got 1 more point. We're going to go ahead and throw it into Reaper's Ascendance. This gives us 2% increased spell damage per stack of the Reaper's Ascendance that you gain. You gain 1 stack of that every 5 seconds in Reaper form. We are staying in it long enough to get to 20 plus stacks right now, so at this point it will be 40% increased spell damage, which is nice. If you want, you can build into Death Touch 𝐒𝐲 instead to just get that base necrotic damage at all times. For Aura of Decay, 1 more point, we're going to cap out that Undertow for the slow chance, so we are now slowing and chilling enemies every second, or have a % chance to. And then for Death Seal, that final point for us is going to go into Tachycardia for that increased death wave frequency and the crit chance for it. For passives, we got 13 more points. We're going to cap out the Dark Guard for that increased critical strike chance. And for Clairvoyant Insight, it's going to give us critical strike multiplier. Again, we're aiming for that 100% critical strike chance with Hungering Souls, so crit multiplier will be very effective once we have that, as that's just basically 50% increased damage, which is really, really nice. And then the last 3 points, we're going to go ahead and throw them into Apocrypha for that intelligence, but for the mana regen as well, so that we can manually cast more Hungering Souls whenever Death Seal is not active. So it'll be really nice for damage when we do have that downtime from Death Seal. And then for the inventory, nothing super fancy. We have found a couple of exalted items. We have some vitality on the boots. We have increased critical strike chance on the relic. And then we have elemental resist on the ring. Again, at this point, get all your resistances, your CSA, and your endurance on gear for the weapon. You want as much flat spell damage with increased increased spell damage or increased necrotic damage. Or as we have here, critical strike multiplier. As you get to 100% crit, that critical strike multiplier will be more effective, which is really nice. And then our Weaver's Will item that we found, it does have 8 stats, but really this isn't doing us much good at this point. As soon as we find a nice pair of gloves, we will be getting rid of that, probably for an exalted pair of gloves that has an element of resistance that we need. And for your idols, we are running the healing effectiveness. If you can find 4 of the healing effectiveness and the increased health, these ones are big for you. The reason why is that healing effectiveness scales with the % increased health that's being healed for missing health. So like Aura of Decay right now, it heals us for 8% of our missing health. So when we're missing our health, whenever Death Seal's active and you're low life, you're missing a huge percentage of your life, you're getting healed. That healing amount is scaled with healing effectiveness. So if we can get to 320% healing effectiveness, when you're low life and you're capped at that 33% of maximum health, you'll have that full 33% healed every second that Aura of Decay is active. So that's one of the main things we're going for. So this is the ideal idol that you'll want. But that's going to be it for this update and for this leveling guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And it will be obviously posted on YouTube once you see this. So have a good one.